The ballroom was full of people with titles, bodyguards, and seven-figure salaries. And not one of them saw it coming. Not the security director with his earpiece and tailored suit, not the team of professionals who'd swept the room twice that morning. Nobody except the man in the gray coveralls pushing a mop cart near the service entrance. He saw it. He'd been trained to see exactly this kind of thing, a long time ago, in a life he'd deliberately left behind. The question wasn't whether Nathan Cole could stop what was about to happen. The question was whether anyone would get out of his way long enough to let him. If this story hooks you from the first minute, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. The Windsor Regency Hotel had a way of making certain people feel like furniture. Not intentionally, maybe. Or maybe exactly intentionally. It was hard to say with a place like that. The lobby alone cost more to maintain in a single month than most people earned in a year. Imported marble floors, a chandelier that had been individually assembled by 3 artisans flown in from overseas, flower arrangements refreshed every 48 hours by a florist who charged more per stem than a decent lunch. The whole building operated on the unspoken principle that beauty required a hierarchy, and the hierarchy required some people to be invisible so that others could feel seen. Nathan Cole had been invisible at the Windsor Regency for going on 4 years. He didn't mind it. That was the part most people wouldn't understand if they'd bothered to ask, which they never did. He genuinely did not mind the gray coveralls with the embroidered name patch, or the maintenance cart with its rattling wheels, or the way front desk staff would look right through him mid-sentence when a guest walked in. He'd chosen this. He'd chosen exactly this. There was a version of Nathan Cole that had lived a very different kind of life, and he had walked away from that version deliberately, with both eyes open and no regrets he was willing to examine too closely. Most mornings he arrived at 6:15, punched in at the basement-level staff entrance, and began his first circuit of the building before the breakfast crowd thinned out. He knew every corridor, every service shaft, every utility closet that stuck and needed to be lifted slightly before it would open. He knew which elevator had a hydraulic stutter on the 3rd floor and which bathroom on the mezzanine level had a slow drain that housekeeping kept forgetting to report. He knew the building the way you only know a place when you've spent years paying attention to it without any agenda except keeping it functional. That Tuesday started like most Tuesdays, except the hotel had sold the ballroom for the week to a corporate group called Meridian Capital Holdings, and by 7 in the morning the loading dock was already moving with delivery vans, catering suppliers, and a small army of event staff in matching black uniforms. Nathan navigated around them without comment, checked the service corridor lighting on the east wing, replaced a loose ceiling panel in the back hallway near the kitchen, and was halfway through his second cup of coffee in the basement break room when Denny from housekeeping dropped onto the bench across from him and blew out a long breath. "Big one today," Denny said. He was maybe 23, still new enough that he hadn't learned to pace himself. "You see who's coming?" "I saw the setup." "Victoria Sterling." Denny said it like the name was supposed to land with weight. When Nathan didn't react, he leaned forward. "CEO of Meridian, like one of the top 5 most powerful women in the country, depending on who you ask. She's got a security detail, like actual professionals, 3 of them. I heard the event coordinator tell someone they swept the ballroom twice already this morning." Nathan took a sip of his coffee. "Does anything impress you?" "Good coffee impresses me." He looked into his cup. "This is not good coffee." Denny laughed despite himself. Nathan finished the cup anyway and went back to work. Tuts. By 10 o'clock the ballroom was transforming. Nathan passed by it twice on legitimate maintenance routes. A ventilation filter check, then a report from the banquet manager about a light fixture flickering on the east wall near the stage. He noted the room's layout as it developed, round tables arranged in clusters, a raised presentation stage at the north end, 3 temporary bars staffed by catering crew, a media setup with projection screens and cabling that someone had run too close to a foot traffic corridor. He mentioned the cable routing to a woman with a clipboard who looked at him with the expression people reserved for pigeons that wandered too close. Not hostile exactly, just categorically dismissive. "We've got it handled," she said, without looking up. He didn't push it. He just made a mental note of where the cables were. The light fixture turned out to be a loose wire connection in the housing, a 5-minute fix. He was on his way out of the ballroom, cart in tow, when the main doors opened and a group moved through with the specific compressed energy of people who believe their time costs more than other people's. Victoria Sterling came in first, or rather, she came in surrounded. Two men in dark suits flanking her, a third hanging back near the door. She was taller than he'd expected from the vague impression of her he'd absorbed over the years, and she moved like someone who had stopped apologizing for taking up space a long time ago. 50, maybe a few years past. Hair cut short and severe, a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly rent. He was moving to the side with his cart, the automatic choreography of his working life, when she stopped. Not because of him. She was scanning the room, probably assessing the staging setup, and her gaze swept past him the way gazes did. And then it came back. "What is that doing in here?" The event coordinator materialized at her elbow. "I'm sorry?" Victoria Sterling pointed at Nathan's cart. "The maintenance equipment. We have a presentation in 2 hours." "He was just finishing up a repair." "I can see that." She turned to Nathan directly for the first time. It wasn't a look he could easily categorize. It wasn't contempt exactly. Contempt would have required more interest. It was the particular flatness of someone who has never had to consider a maintenance worker as a full person and sees no reason to start now. "How much longer?" "I'm done," Nathan said. "Good." She started to turn away. Something made her pause. She looked back, and this time there was something almost curious in it, the way you might look twice at a piece of furniture that seemed out of place. "This room is a controlled environment for the next 48 hours. You understand that? If there are any other issues, they go through my event coordinator. Not through," she waved a hand loosely in his direction, "whatever informal process you normally use." Nathan looked at her for a moment. He thought about 3 or 4 things he could say. "Understood," he said. He pushed the cart toward the service exit. Behind him, he heard her say something to the coordinator, something about the vetting process for contract staff, and a short sound that might have been a laugh, and then the doors swung closed behind him and the ballroom noise dropped away. He stood in the service corridor for a moment. His jaw was tight. He noticed it, acknowledged it, and moved on. The catering team arrived in full around 11. Nathan was working his standard midday circuit, checking stairwell lighting, responding to a guest complaint about a loose towel rack on the 4th floor, when he passed the staff entrance where the catering crew was checking in. Standard process. They had a list, each person checked against it, name badges issued. Nothing unusual. Nathan glanced at it the way he glanced at everything, without urgency, just because old habits don't fully die no matter how far you walk from the life that built them. He kept moving. 30 minutes later, he was replacing a burned-out lamp in the corridor near the ballroom's secondary service entrance when the catering crew started moving equipment through. A line of them, black shirts and aprons, rolling carts of chafing dishes and glassware. He held the service door and they filed past, most of them focused on their loads, a few nodding. One didn't. Nathan didn't react to that consciously. It was more like something shifted slightly in the background of his attention, the way a sound technician might not consciously hear a frequency drift, but knows something changed. He watched the man pass, mid-30s, medium build, the catering uniform fitting a little wrong across the shoulders in a way that read as borrowed rather than assigned. He was carrying a covered tray, both hands, looking straight ahead with the practiced neutrality of someone concentrating on looking like they belonged. That concentration was the thing. The rest of the crew had the relaxed distraction of people doing a job they've done 100 times. Some of them were talking to each other. One woman was checking her phone while she pushed a cart. 2 guys near the back were arguing about a parking spot. They moved with the loose, semi-attentive energy of professional routine. This man moved like he was being watched. Nathan finished with the lamp housing and went back to his cart. He stood there a moment, appearing to sort through supplies, while he tracked the man in his peripheral vision through the propped service door. The man set his tray down on a side table, hands free now, and did something that looked like adjusting his apron. Nathan watched his hands. The movement wasn't quite right. You don't adjust an apron like that unless you're repositioning something under it. Nathan walked to the service coordinator's station near the main corridor junction. The coordinator was a compact, stressed-looking man named Gerald, who Nathan had spoken to maybe 4 times in as many years. "Gerald." Gerald looked up from his tablet with the expression of someone who has been interrupted 17 times in the past hour. What? One of the catering crew that just came through, mid-30s, about 6 feet, crew cut. Something's off about him. Gerald stared at him. Off how? The way he's moving, he's not working, he's watching. A pause. Gerald's expression did something complicated, cycling through irritation, professional caution, and the specific calculation of whether it was worth taking a maintenance worker seriously about a security concern. The calculation took about 2 seconds and came out negative. The catering company was vetted. They all had credentials. I know. I'm telling you something's off. Have you ever worked security? Or can you just have someone? Listen. Gerald dropped his voice and his patience simultaneously. I have a major corporate event in 90 minutes with a principal who will make my life extraordinarily difficult if anything goes sideways. I don't have time to... He gestured vaguely. Respond to hunches. If you see something that is clearly a problem, report it to one of the security personnel. That's not my department. He went back to his tablet. Nathan stood there. He thought about pushing it. He thought about the 3 words that could have changed Gerald's calculation entirely, that could have changed everything. Words from his other life, credentials that would have snapped attention into place like a switch. He didn't use them. He hadn't used them in 4 years. He walked back toward the ballroom corridor, and he did what he'd been trained to do long before he ever pushed a maintenance cart. He kept watching. Vuato. The man in the borrowed uniform had repositioned himself near the east side of the ballroom, close to the bar setup, but not staffing it. He'd picked up a cloth and was making slow, unconvincing passes at wiping down a surface. Any working catering employee would have had 3 other tasks competing for attention. This man had 1 task, and it wasn't the cloth. Nathan moved through the corridor outside the ballroom's secondary access, keeping the interior visible through the narrowed gap of the propped fire door. He watched the man's sight lines. He watched where the man's eyes went when new people entered. The man wasn't watching the room. He was watching the stage. More specifically, he was watching the spot where Victoria Sterling would stand in about an hour. Nathan's phone buzzed. A work order, a guest issue on the 6th floor. He didn't move. He thought about the layout of the room. The man was positioned on the east side, about 40 feet from the stage. The primary security presence, 2 of Victoria's detail, were staged near the main entrance on the opposite end. The third was with Victoria, who was presumably still in the suite they'd set aside for pre-event preparation on the 2nd floor. 40 feet. Easy distance to close quickly. The catering staff created a natural density of movement that would generate confusion in the first few seconds. By the time anyone processed what was happening, 40 feet was nothing. Nathan pulled out his phone and called the hotel security desk. It rang 4 times. Hotel security. This is Cole, maintenance. I need someone in the ballroom right now. One of the catering crew is... Sir, the Meridian event has a private security detail that's coordinating all... I understand that. I'm telling you, one of the people inside that room right now doesn't belong there. A pause. Do you have a name or a badge number? No. Did he do something? Not yet. Another pause. Longer. Sir, if you'd like to speak directly to the event security team... Nathan hung up. He was already moving toward the ballroom's main entrance. He didn't have a radio, didn't have credentials, didn't have anything except 4 years of deliberate anonymity and a set of skills that had never actually left him. He had coveralls and a name patch and hands that knew exactly what to do with distance and timing, and a threat that nobody else in the building was taking seriously. The double doors of the Windsor Regency Grand Ballroom were propped open now, guests beginning to filter in for the pre-event reception. Servers moved with trays. The presentation stage was lit, branded screens displaying the Meridian Capital logo in a slow rotation. Nathan walked in. The man near the east bar was still there. Their eyes didn't meet, but Nathan felt the man's attention shift slightly, the way prey feels something change in the air before it processes the specific danger. Nathan moved along the room's perimeter, slow and purposeful, just another hotel employee doing something unremarkable, and he positioned himself in a place he chose carefully, behind the man's sight line to the stage, close enough, at an angle that gave him a half-second advantage he hadn't had from the corridor. He waited. Across the room, through the main entrance, he could see Victoria Sterling arriving with her escort. She'd come down early, working the pre-event networking with the fluid efficiency of someone who understood that power is performed continuously, not just on stage. She shook hands. She laughed at something. She moved through the room like she'd been designed for exactly this. The man near the east bar put down the cloth. His right hand moved to his apron. Nathan was already moving. The man's hand was still moving toward his apron when Nathan closed the last few feet between them and stopped just off his right shoulder, close enough to be in the way, not close enough to trigger alarm. He didn't touch him. Not yet. Instead, he picked up a glass from the nearest tray setup and turned slightly, like he was checking something on the bar surface, and said in a voice low enough that only the man could hear it, "Don't." One word. Flat. No threat in the tone, no performance. Just the kind of quiet certainty that people recognize in their bones before their brains catch up. The man went very still. For 2 seconds, neither of them moved. The ballroom continued around them. Servers crossing, guests settling at tables, the low accumulation of conversation and clinks and presentation audio being tested at the front of the room. The world proceeding normally about 20 feet in every direction from 2 men standing completely still near the east bar. Then the man turned his head slowly, just enough to get a look at Nathan. His eyes moved over the gray coveralls, the name patch, the maintenance cart sitting near the service door 20 feet back where Nathan had left it. Whatever calculation he ran, it reached a conclusion Nathan could read clearly. Not a threat. A maintenance worker who got too close. "Back off," the man said. Quiet too, but with a different quality. Tension under it, pulled tight. "I don't think I will," Nathan said. He set down the glass and turned toward the man fully, not aggressive, not squared up for confrontation, just present, occupying space in a way that changed the geometry of what the man could do next. The man's jaw shifted. His eyes moved quickly around the room, exits, distances, the security presence near the main doors. He was recalculating. "You have no idea what you're doing," the man said. "I have some idea," Nathan said. What happened next happened fast. The man made a decision. Nathan could see it in the half-second before it executed, the specific weight shift that precedes movement, and took a step to the left, trying to angle around. Nathan moved with him, a simple redirect, not a block, just a body repositioning that cut the angle. The man stopped. His breathing had changed. Nathan could hear it even in the ambient noise of the room. Then Gerald appeared. He came in from the main entrance with the specific stride of someone who had reconsidered something and was annoyed about having to. He spotted Nathan immediately, and his expression confirmed that the annoyance was primarily directed there. "Cole." He came across the room at a controlled pace, not wanting to draw attention. "What are you doing? I told you." "This man needs to be checked," Nathan said. Gerald arrived beside them and looked at the man in the catering uniform, who had settled into a posture of relaxed indignation, shoulders dropped, chin slightly up, the performance of someone wrongly accused. It was a good adjustment. Quick. "I work the event," the man said to Gerald. "Your maintenance guy is harassing my team." Gerald looked between them. Nathan watched his face do the same calculation it had done earlier, and this time the math was complicated by the fact that he was standing right in the middle of it and couldn't walk away. "Can I see your badge?" Gerald asked the man. The man reached up and tapped his badge. Legitimate, properly issued, name and company logo. "Marcus Webb, Silverline Catering, you want to call my supervisor?" Gerald looked at Nathan. The look said, "Are you sure about this?" Nathan was sure. He was completely sure in the way he'd learned to trust over years that had cost him more than he usually let himself think about. But he was also standing in a hotel ballroom in gray coveralls with no credentials and no authority and nothing except his own read of a situation that everyone around him had already decided wasn't worth their time. "His positioning doesn't match his role," Nathan said. "He hasn't done a single task since he came in. He's been watching the stage." "I was taking a break," the man said, with the specific weariness of someone who wants to sound like they're managing an absurd situation. "Is that against the rules?" Gerald rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, Cole, I appreciate that you're trying to be helpful, but this has to go through the event security. I called the security desk. They told me to talk to you." "Well then," Gerald started, "and I talked to you 20 minutes ago, and you told me to call the security desk." The sentence landed. Gerald's mouth closed. He had the grace, at least, to look uncomfortable. The man named Marcus Webb used that pause. "I need to get back to work," he said, and began to move. Not fast. Deliberate. Nathan took a breath and made a decision. "Webb," he said. The man kept walking. "Marcus Webb." A little louder. Still not loud enough to carry broadly in the room noise, but loud enough that two nearby guests glanced over and a server paused mid-step. The man stopped. He turned around. His face had gone through another change. The indignation was still there, but underneath it something else had surfaced, something cold and measuring. He looked at Nathan the way you look at a problem that has gotten complicated. "You need to stay where you are," Nathan said, "until someone with a badge verifies your check-in." On whose authority? It was a fair question. Nathan didn't have a good answer for it. He was a maintenance technician at a hotel. His authority extended to HVAC units and loose ceiling tiles. He stood there and held the man's gaze and said nothing, because nothing was better than a lie, and the truth wasn't something he was prepared to use. Gerald, to his credit, did something useful. Maybe it was the two guests watching, or Nathan's flat certainty, or just the compressed anxiety of a man responsible for an event with a 9-figure client. He pulled out his radio. "I need event security at the East Bar. Now, please." The man's eyes moved to the radio, then back to Nathan. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then one of Victoria Sterling's detail, the one who'd been stationed near the main entrance, a broad-shouldered man Nathan had clocked as the most situationally aware of the three, came across the room with the measured pace of someone who moved fast without appearing to. His name, Nathan would later learn, was Reeves. "Problem?" Reeves said. Gerald started to explain. Nathan let him, watching Marcus Webb. Webb had gone quiet and inward, no longer performing indignation. He was waiting, thinking, running through options. Reeves looked at Webb. "Step to the side with me. I have a job to do." "1 minute," Reeves said. His voice had the quality of someone who was not going to say it twice. Webb looked at him for a moment, then complied, moving with Reeves toward the edge of the room. Nathan followed at a distance. Reeves radioed something Nathan couldn't fully catch. Then he asked for Webb's badge and credentials. Webb provided them. Smooth, cooperative, the indignation entirely gone now, replaced with something that looked like patience. While Reeves was on the radio, Webb's right hand moved toward his apron again. Slower this time, a casual gesture, adjusting something, completely natural looking. Nathan was already stepping forward when Reeves clocked it too. "Hold on," Reeves said. Everything in the room that could happen quickly, then happened quickly. Webb's hand came out of the apron with a blade. Not large, a fixed 4-inch knife, which was all you actually needed if you knew how to use it and had closed enough distance. Reeves was good. He stepped back and got his arm up immediately, properly trained, and his other hand went for the weapon arm. But Webb pivoted, and the pivot took him past Reeves's reach, and suddenly there was open floor between Webb and the stage, where Victoria Sterling was standing with her back half-turned, saying something to a colleague, no awareness at all of what was crossing the room toward her. Nathan had already moved. The math of the room had been in his head since he first positioned himself. Distances, angles, what was between him and the stage, what was between Webb and the stage. He'd been doing it unconsciously for the better part of an hour. He moved on a line that cut Webb's trajectory before Webb reached open space, and he didn't move like a maintenance worker, didn't move like someone hoping to slow things down or create enough noise to get security's attention. He moved like what he used to be. He hit Webb from the right side, not a tackle, a controlled disruption, shoulder into Webb's weapon arm, redirecting the forward momentum without letting it transfer to the floor where it became a grapple neither of them could fully control. Webb was strong and knew what he was doing. He twisted and tried to bring the blade back around, and for a second the two of them were locked in something that looked from 6 feet away like a confused collision. Then Reeves got there. Reeves had good instincts, but he was coming in hot, and he got the read slightly wrong. He came for the struggle rather than the specific geometry of it, and his first grab caught Nathan's left arm instead of Webb's. For a half-second, it was 3 people tangled in a way that was more dangerous than 2, because Nathan now had his left arm compromised, and couldn't use it to control Webb's knife hand the way he needed to. He adapted. He let Reeves's forward momentum do some of the work, used it to shift Webb off angle, stepped through the gap it created, got his right hand on Webb's wrist from the outside, and bent it in a direction wrists don't naturally travel. The knife hit the floor. Webb made a sound. Not a scream, more like a word that got broken in half by pain. Reeves sorted himself out in the next 2 seconds and got Webb's other arm. Together they put him down. Not gracefully. It was ugly and loud, and a chair got knocked over, and 3 people nearby made sounds ranging from alarm to confusion. Nathan straightened up. His left shoulder ached where Reeves had grabbed it. He had a scrape on his right hand from the floor that he hadn't noticed happening. He stood there breathing slightly harder than he'd like, and watched Reeves get Webb's arms behind him with a zip tie that appeared from somewhere professional. Webb was on the ground, cheek pressed to the marble that had cost a fortune per square foot, breathing hard. He turned his head just enough to get Nathan in his sightline. Something in his face, not rage exactly, more like the look of a man reassessing a mistake he hadn't seen coming. "Who are you?" he said. Nathan didn't answer. Reeves looked up at Nathan from where he was crouched over Webb. His expression was not easy to read. There was professional acknowledgement in it, and something else. The specific recalibration that happens when you have to admit, without using words, that someone just did something you should have done first. "You want to tell me who you are?" Reeves said, calmer than the question deserved under the circumstances. "I work maintenance," Nathan said. Reeves looked at him for another moment. "Right," he said. "Sure you do." Across the room, 30 feet away, Victoria Sterling had turned. Her remaining bodyguard had moved in front of her automatically, and she was looking past him toward the scene near the east bar. The overturned chair, the man on the ground, Reeves with his radio already up. Her expression was difficult to parse from that distance, but Nathan could see the precise moment she registered that something real had just happened. The room had gone from managed event noise to a different kind of quiet, the kind that only settles when people realize they were just in proximity to something dangerous and didn't know it. Her eyes moved around the room, doing what powerful people's eyes always do in a moment of disruption, looking for context, for explanation, for the shape of what just occurred. They landed, briefly, on Nathan. He didn't look away. He didn't make anything of it. He just stood there in his gray coveralls with the scrape on his hand and his name stitched on the patch above the pocket, and he held her gaze for exactly as long as it took for her expression to shift from assessment to something more complicated and uncertain. Then he looked away, because there was nothing to perform and nothing to claim, and the knife was on the floor 3 feet away, and somewhere in the building police were already being called. Gerald appeared at his elbow. He looked shaken, not dramatically, just the low-grade pale quality of a man who has processed how close something terrible came to happening on his watch. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He seemed to be searching for something adequate. "Cole," he finally said. "Yeah, that was..." A pause. "How did you..." "His positioning," Nathan said, "and the way he moved his hands." He bent down and picked up a cloth napkin from the toppled chair, not to preserve evidence. That instinct had already made him step back from the knife, just to do something with his hands while the room resettled around him. People who work with their hands look a certain way when they're not working. He didn't look that way. Gerald stared at him. "That's it? That's a lot, actually." More of Victoria's security team had converged on the area now. A hotel manager Nathan had interacted with maybe twice in 4 years was crossing the lobby at speed. Somewhere near the main entrance, Nathan could hear the quality of noise changing, guests being redirected, the event coordinator making quick, urgent sounds into her headset. He stood in the middle of it and felt, strangely and against his better effort, the old familiar weight of having done the thing he was built to do. It didn't feel triumphant. It never had. It felt more like standing in a specific place you told yourself you'd never stand again and being unable to explain, even to yourself, exactly how you ended up back there. The hotel manager arrived. Nathan gave him the short version, what he'd observed, what he'd reported, what happened when the knife appeared. He used simple declarative sentences and left out everything that would have required explanation. The manager listened with the expression of a man whose professional cortex was firing in 17 directions at once, nodded, and asked Nathan to stay available for the police. "Of course," Nathan said. Reeves was on his feet now. Webb handed off to a second officer who'd arrived from hotel security. He crossed to Nathan and stood beside him, not quite shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the room that was slowly trying to remember what it had been doing 40 minutes ago. "The blade was concealed in a modified apron seam," Reeves said, not looking at him. "We'd have caught it with a wand sweep at the door if we'd run one on the catering crew." "You ran one on the main guests," Nathan said. "Standard protocol." "Yeah." A pause. "Catering comes through the service entrance. Different protocol. Vetted company, pre-cleared list." Another pause. "Someone got on that list who shouldn't have." "Someone with access to the list," Nathan said. Reeves looked at him then. "That's going to be a long investigation." "It always is." Reeves was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had a different quality. Less professional, more direct. The way people talk when they drop the layer they usually keep up. "I've been doing this 12 years, and I got the read wrong in there. By about 2 seconds. Nathan didn't say anything consoling. He didn't say it happens or you recovered clean. He just nodded once because that was what it deserved. Acknowledgement, not absolution. 2 seconds is a long time, Nathan said. "Yeah," Reeves said. "It is." The police arrived 11 minutes later and the room shifted again, taking on the particular quality of a space that has become, officially, a crime scene and an event venue simultaneously, two entirely different institutional logics running in parallel and producing a kind of ambient friction that everyone felt and nobody named. Nathan gave his statement to a detective named Park, who wrote things down with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned not to show surprise on her face and who asked twice, in slightly different ways, whether Nathan had any professional background in security or law enforcement. Both times, Nathan said no. Detective Park looked at him both times with an expression that said she had noted the answer and formed her own view of it. She closed her notebook and handed him a card. "Don't go too far," she said. "I'm not going anywhere," Nathan said. "I still have the 6th floor lamp to deal with." She blinked. Then she looked at him, really looked, the way very few people had in 4 years at the Windsor Regency. And something almost like a smile crossed her face before she moved on. Nathan walked back to his cart. He checked the inventory out of habit, unnecessary habit, but his hands needed something. The scrape on his right palm had dried to a dark line. His shoulder was going to ache tomorrow. He'd been standing for most of the past 2 hours, and he was 51 years old, and his lower back had opinions about that. He picked up his radio and called in the work order for the 6th floor. Denny appeared from somewhere, looking at him with an expression that had moved several steps past the ordinary. "Cole, what happened in there? I heard someone had a knife and that you saw lamps out on the 6th floor," Nathan said. "You want to grab the other cart?" Denny stared at him. "Are you serious right now?" Nathan considered the question more genuinely than Denny probably expected. "Yeah," he said. "Guest still doesn't have light in their room." He pushed the cart toward the elevator. Behind him, he could hear Denny still standing in the corridor, doing the thing people do when they've encountered something they can't quite fit into a category they already have. The elevator doors opened. Nathan stepped in. He rode it to the 6th floor with the maintenance cart and the ache in his shoulder and the particular quiet of someone who has spent a long time choosing not to be what other people want to make of him. The lamp was a simple fix. Burned filament, standard replacement. He had it done in 4 minutes. The 6th floor was quiet in the way that hotel floors get quiet in the middle of the day. A specific kind of muffled stillness, carpet-absorbing sound, the distant hum of HVAC, the occasional muted television through a closed door. Nathan rolled the cart back to the service elevator and stood waiting for it with his hands loose at his sides and his mind doing what it always did after something like that, running the replay, looking for what he'd missed, what he'd done wrong, where the 2 seconds could have been tighter. The wrist bend had been sloppy. He'd had to put more force into it than he should have needed because his left arm was compromised. If Reeves hadn't been there to absorb Webb's other side, the whole thing goes differently. That wasn't a comfortable thought, and he didn't try to make it comfortable. It was just true. And true things deserve to be looked at straight. The elevator came. He pushed the cart in and rode it down to the basement level, where the maintenance department occupied a series of rooms that smelled like cleaning solution and machine oil, and the particular staleness of a space that fluorescent lights have been doing their worst to for decades. He locked the cart, filed the work order closed on the wall terminal, and sat down on the bench in the break room. His shoulder had moved from ache to something more specific. He rolled it carefully. Nothing torn, just angry. He'd be fine. He sat there for a while without getting coffee. The break room was empty. Somewhere above him, the Windsor Regency was managing the collision of two realities, a crime scene and a corporate event that had cost considerable money to arrange, and that Victoria Sterling's team was presumably trying to salvage. He could hear nothing of it from down here. That was almost funny. His phone buzzed. Denny. Bro, what the actual hell happened in that ballroom? Nathan put the phone face down on the bench. Detective Park found him there 12 minutes later. She came through the basement with the hotel manager, whose name Nathan had finally absorbed, Marcus Clifford, and a second detective he hadn't met yet, younger, with a notepad and the specific attentiveness of someone early enough in their career that they still wrote everything down. Mr. Cole, Park said, got a few more questions when you're ready. I'm ready, Nathan said. She sat across from him without preamble, which he appreciated. The younger detective stood near the door. Clifford hovered near the coffee machine like a man who needed something to do with himself. Marcus Webb, Park said, what I'm about to tell you isn't public yet, but given your involvement, you'll hear it eventually. His real name is Marcus Grayfield. He has a record, assault, 1 count of aggravated battery from 7 years ago, both related to a business dispute. The company he listed as his employer, Silverline Catering, is legitimate, but Grayfield isn't on their payroll. Someone submitted his paperwork under a different name, got him on the cleared list. How long ago? Nathan asked. The submission was made 4 days ago. We're working backward from there. She paused. He had the knife, and a second item we're still processing in the lab, something that was sewn into the lining of the apron, not the seam. Nathan didn't ask what the second item was. Park looked like she was deciding whether to tell him anyway. A second blade, she said. Shorter. The kind of thing you go to if the first option gets taken. Nathan nodded. He'd figured it was something like that. You don't go to the trouble of getting on an event's cleared vendor list for a single blade at close range. You plan for complications. He had a plan B, Nathan said. He had a plan B, Park confirmed, which means whoever sent him thought through failure points. She looked at him steadily. You want to tell me again that you have no professional background in security? Nathan looked at the table. It was an old folding table with a coffee ring stain that had been there at least as long as he had. I want to tell you that what's relevant is what happened today, and I've given you that completely. Park was quiet for a moment. That's not really an answer. It's the answer I have. She studied him. He'd been studied by people considerably more practiced at it than a detective, and he sat with it without discomfort or performance. All right, she said finally. Here's what I need from you. Full written statement. Everything from the first time you observed Grayfield through the moment we arrived. In your own words, in sequence. Can you do that? Yes. The DA's office is going to want to talk to you as well. Depending on what we find about who sent him, this could be a long investigation. You'll be asked to cooperate. I'll cooperate. Park stood. She looked at him one more time with that same quality of careful assessment, and he had the impression she was filing something away about him, something she'd return to. You probably saved her life, she said. I thought you should hear that said plainly, since I suspect no one's going to make a big deal of saying it. Doesn't need to be a big deal, Nathan said. No, she said. But it's still true. She left. Clifford started to follow, then stopped at the door. He was a careful, precise man who'd run the Windsor Regency for 9 years, with minimal drama and maximal attention to his guest satisfaction scores, and today had been about as far from his operational comfort zone as a day could get. Nathan, he said. He'd never used Nathan's first name before. I want you to know, whatever you need for the rest of the day. If you want to go home, I'm fine, Nathan said. I've still got the East Wing ventilation check. Clifford blinked. That can wait. It's been waiting since Monday. One of the duct connections is loose and it's creating a pressure differential that's going to cost you in heating bills if it goes another week. Nathan stood up. I'd rather finish the shift. Clifford looked at him with an expression that had moved beyond the ordinary categories available to hotel managers. All right, he said. All right. The afternoon moved at its own pace. Nathan did the ventilation check. He found the loose duct connection where he'd expected it and spent 40 minutes in a service crawl space with his tools and a drop light, fixing something unglamorous and necessary. The work was good. It always was. There was a specific satisfaction in mechanical problems. They existed, they had causes, they had solutions, and when you finished the solution, the problem was gone. The world didn't offer that kind of cleanness very often. He could hear, muffled through the building's bones, the Meridian Capital event resuming on the floor above. Victoria Sterling's team had apparently made the decision, correctly, he thought, that shutting down was exactly what Grayfield's employer had wanted, and that proceeding was the most direct refusal of that logic available to them. So the presentation went on. Different energy, probably. That kind of near miss leaves a residue. But it went on. He emerged from the crawl space at 4:15 with grease on his forearm and the loose duct connection secured. He was sealing the access panel when he heard footsteps in the service corridor. Purposeful footsteps, not maintenance rhythm. Reeves appeared around the corner. He'd changed something about his positioning. Not his clothes, but the way he carried himself. The professional compression was still there, but something under it had shifted. He looked like a man who'd been having an internal argument and had arrived at something. Thought I'd find you down here, Reeves said. Ventilation check. Right. Reeves leaned against the corridor wall and crossed his arms. Not hostile, just settling in. Webb is being processed. He's not talking about who sent him, but they'll get there. There's enough on his phone to start pulling threads. Good. Ms. Sterling moved the main presentation to tomorrow morning. Tighter security protocol, venue sweep including catering staff, the works. A pause. Should have been the protocol today. You can't sweep for everything, Nathan said. He meant it. You can do more than we did. Reeves's jaw moved. I've been running protection details for 8 years. I'm good at this job. I know I'm good at it. He paused. And I missed what you saw in about 45 seconds. I had time and no other responsibilities, Nathan said. You were managing a principal in a room full of executives in a full-day event. Different field of view. That's generous. It's accurate. Reeves looked at him. I grabbed your arm. In there, when I came in. You did. I compromised your control of the situation because I read it wrong. You also helped put him down. After you'd already done the hard part. Reeves uncrossed his arms. He had the specific quality of a man who gives credit reluctantly, not because he's stingy with it, but because it costs him something real. I want to know who I'm giving it to. That's all. You don't have to give me a resume. Just, who are you? Nathan thought about the crawl space he'd just spent 40 minutes in. He thought about the lamp on the 6th floor and the loose ceiling panel in the back hallway and the coffee that was never good enough in the basement break room. I'm the maintenance technician, he said. That's what I am right now. Reeves looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Not like he was satisfied, but like he'd decided to accept the answer for what it was. You moved like someone with EP training, Reeves said. The way you cut his angle before he had open floor. That's not instinct. That's drilling. Nathan didn't confirm or deny it. He picked up his tools and started packing them into the carry bag. If you ever want back in that world, Reeves started. I don't, Nathan said, quickly, but without heat. But I appreciate the thought. Another pause. Reeves pushed off the wall. She wants to talk to you. Nathan looked up. Victoria Sterling. Yeah. Why? Reeves gave him a look that suggested the question was a little absurd given the circumstances. You stopped someone from putting a blade in her. People tend to want to acknowledge that. She doesn't need to. No, Reeves said. She doesn't need to. She wants to. He paused. There's a difference. At least that's what she told me when she sent me down here. Nathan looked at the access panel he'd just sealed. He thought about saying no. Not out of avoidance, but out of a genuine preference for the crawl space and the service corridor and the remainder of a shift that had been strange enough already. But there was something in the way Reeves said she wants to that carried information. Not a command, not a performance, something that cost something. 5 minutes, Nathan said. That's all she asked for. They took the service elevator to the second floor, where the hotel had set aside a suite for Victoria Sterling's team to use as a base of operations. The suite's main room had been converted into a working space. Laptops, printed documents, 2 people on phones in separate corners. The specific productive chaos of a high-level executive support system. Victoria Sterling was standing at the window when Nathan came in. She turned when she heard the door, and for a moment she just looked at him. Not the way she'd looked at him in the ballroom that morning, with that flat incuriosity of the categorically dismissed. This was different. More direct. More uncomfortable for her, he thought, which he hadn't expected. She looked tired. Not weak. The bearing was still there, the compressed authority she'd carried into the ballroom that morning. But the event had cost her something, adrenaline and its aftermath, the body's honest accounting of how close things had come. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Miss Sterling." One of her people started to drift toward them, and she made a small gesture that sent them back to the corner. Reeves positioned himself near the door and became very interested in the middle distance. Victoria Sterling walked toward him and stopped at a reasonable distance and said nothing for a moment. She had the quality of a woman who is usually very precise about words and was currently finding them insufficient. "I want to thank you," she said, "for what you did." "You're welcome," Nathan said. He kept it simple because simple was true. She looked at him like the simplicity surprised her. I owe you an apology." She said it cleanly, no qualification around it, which told him it cost her. "This morning, what I said, how I spoke to you." He could have made it easy for her. He was aware of that option. He chose not to take it, not out of cruelty, but because making it too easy would have been its own kind of condescension. "You treated me the way you treat maintenance workers," he said. "Most people in your position do." She held his gaze. She didn't flinch from it, which he gave her credit for. "That's not an excuse." "I know," he said. "I wasn't offering you one." A pause. Something moved across her face. Not offense, more like the expression of someone recalibrating, adjusting to a conversation that wasn't following expected patterns. "Reeves tells me you have some professional background," she said carefully. "That you saw what his entire team missed." "Reeves is a good operator," Nathan said. "He had a more complex problem to manage than I did." "You're defending the man who grabbed your arm and nearly let someone get past." He recovered fast and he secured the suspect. "I'd want him in that room again." Victoria Sterling looked at him for a long moment. "You're a strange man, Mr. Cole." "I've been told." "Who were you?" she asked. "Before this." It was the same question Reeves had asked and Park had asked, and the version of it that everyone who'd looked at him today had wanted to ask. He understood the impulse. He'd done something that didn't fit the label on his chest pocket, and people needed their categories to hold. "Someone who got tired," he said, "of the kind of work that doesn't have a clean end to it." She seemed to understand that more than he expected her to. She was quiet for a moment, and in the quiet she looked out the window at the city below, afternoon light going amber, the Windsor Regency's exterior catching it along its upper floors. "The threat is neutralized," she said, almost to herself. "They'll find who sent him. My team is confident." "Park is good," Nathan said. "She'll find the thread." Victoria looked back at him. "You know her?" "We talked." Another beat. "I want to offer you something," she said. "As not compensation. I know that's the wrong word, but as recognition that what you did today had value, real value, and that I had actively failed to see that value in you before it became undeniable." Nathan looked at her steadily. "I don't need anything." "I know you don't need it. I need to offer it." She said it with the specific self-awareness of someone who has made a career of understanding leverage and power and is trying to step outside of it for once. "What would you want? If you could want anything?" He thought about it honestly, which meant he let himself think about what was actually true rather than what was appropriately modest. For the hotel to take maintenance requests more seriously, he said. There are 3 work orders in the system right now that have been sitting for over 2 weeks because they're low priority according to the current protocol. One of them is a fire door seal that's degraded on the 4th floor. That should not be low priority. Victoria Sterling stared at him. A fire door seal, she repeated. The integrity of a fire door seal is not a minor issue in a building with this occupancy load, Nathan said. I flagged it twice. She turned her head toward Clifford, who had materialized somewhere in the suite without Nathan noticing. Clifford looked like a man watching a reality he understood dissolve and reform around him. Marcus, she said quietly. The fire door. I'll have it addressed tomorrow morning, Clifford said. Tonight, she said. Tonight, Clifford confirmed. She turned back to Nathan. She looked at him for a long moment, and the look had something in it that he couldn't entirely categorize, but professional respect, yes, and the residue of a difficult day, and something more personal than either of those. Something that looked like the particular discomfort of recognizing that your assumptions about the shape of the world have been quietly, completely wrong. Thank you, she said again, for the fire door, and for everything else. Good luck with the presentation tomorrow, Nathan said. She almost smiled. It was a complicated almost. Thank you. He turned to go. Mr. Cole, she said. He stopped. I had a security briefing this morning, she said, before the event. My team told me the room was secure, all entry points cleared, personnel vetted. She paused. And I went into that room believing them completely, because they were professionals, and it was their job, and I didn't think I needed to think about it beyond that. Nathan waited. You were doing your job, she said, and you thought about it anyway. He looked at her. She wasn't asking for a response. He understood that. She was saying something she needed to say, working it out in the saying of it. So he let her have that, and he nodded once, and he left the room. Reeves walked him back to the elevator. They rode it down to the ground floor in a brief silence that wasn't uncomfortable. She's not usually like that, Reeves said. Like what? The apology, the fire door thing. He seemed to be choosing words. She's good at her job and she knows it, and she doesn't often... He stopped. She doesn't often do the thing she just did. Almost getting killed puts things in perspective, Nathan said. For some people it does, Reeves said. For some people it just makes them more convinced they need a better team. The elevator opened on the ground floor. Nathan stepped out. She got both, he said. A better team and some perspective. Not a bad day's return. He crossed the lobby with his tool bag and his grease-stained forearm and the ache deepening in his shoulder as the adrenaline's last lingering chemistry finally finished burning off. A guest in a business suit stepped out of his path without looking at him. The automatic choreography of the invisible. Nathan walked through it without breaking stride. His shift technically ended at 5. It was 4:53. He had enough time to return the tool bag to the basement, update the work log, and be at the staff exit by 5:01 if he moved at a reasonable pace. He moved at a reasonable pace. In the basement break room, Denny was sitting with 2 other housekeeping staff, all 3 of them looking at something on Denny's phone, voices low with the specific energy of people processing something that happened in their building. Nathan returned the tool bag to its hook and started washing his hands at the utility sink. He heard his name in their conversation and didn't turn around. He's right there, one of the housekeeping staff said, in a low, urgent voice. I know he's right there, Denny said. Nathan dried his hands. He turned around. All 3 of them were looking at him. Denny had the expression of someone who had revised his mental model of a person several times in one afternoon and was now fairly certain the model was still incomplete. You okay? Denny said. It was simple and genuine, and Nathan appreciated it more than any of the things Victoria Sterling's people had said to him because Denny meant it without any framework of obligation. Yeah, Nathan said, shoulders sore. Do you need... I'm fine, Denny. He updated the work log, signed out, and walked to the staff exit. The evening air hit him when the door opened, still warm, the city's accumulated heat releasing slowly as the light went down. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment and rolled his shoulder once and listened to the sound of a city going about its business, completely indifferent to what had or hadn't happened inside the Windsor Regency's grand ballroom that afternoon. That was fine. He started walking to his car. He slept badly, which didn't surprise him. It wasn't nightmares. He'd gotten past the nightmares years ago, or more accurately, he'd gotten past the kind of sleep deep enough for nightmares. What he got instead was a light, restless hovering just below consciousness, his body still running its own after-action processing, cataloging what had happened and cross-referencing it against everything that could have gone differently. The shoulder woke him twice. He lay in the dark of his apartment and stared at the ceiling and listened to the city outside doing its 4 in the morning thing. Distant traffic, a siren passing several blocks east, a dog somewhere below his window expressing an opinion about something. His apartment was small and deliberately plain. Not sparse in the way that signals aesthetic choice, not the curated minimalism of someone who'd read the right magazine. Just plain. A couch that was comfortable rather than attractive. Bookshelves with books that had been read rather than displayed. A kitchen where things were where he'd put them because that's where they were useful. He'd moved in 4 years ago with 2 boxes and a duffel bag, and had never felt the need to do much more with the place than keep it clean and functional. He got up at 5:15 and made coffee. Good coffee, the one domestic standard he maintained without compromise, and sat at the small table by the window and watched the sky go from black to the dark blue that preceded dawn. He thought about Webb, whose real name was Grayfield. He thought about the second blade sewn into the apron lining. He thought about Plan B, and whoever had thought through failure points carefully enough to build one. That was the part that didn't sit right, not the attack itself. Hired violence followed a comprehensible logic, brutal and ugly, but comprehensible. What didn't sit right was the sophistication of the entry method. Getting a name onto a pre-cleared vendor list required either access to the event's internal planning documents or a contact inside the organization managing them. That wasn't improvised. That was built over time by someone with patience and resources and a specific personal reason to want Victoria Sterling hurt badly enough to plan it this carefully. He drank his coffee and didn't try to solve it because it wasn't his to solve. Park would pull the thread. She had the kind of methodical focus that good investigators develop, the ability to sit with incomplete information without forcing it into a shape prematurely. She'd get there. He was back at the Windsor Regency by 6:40. The hotel had a different quality that morning. Not dramatic. The lobby looked the same. The front desk staff were doing what they always did. The breakfast service was running. But there was something in the way the staff moved, a slight excess of attention, people checking things they wouldn't normally check. The event staff from Meridian Capital had increased their visible presence in the corridors leading to the ballroom. 2 people Nathan didn't recognize were stationed near the main entrance with the specific stillness of trained security, not Reeves's team. New additions, apparently, brought in overnight. Reeves himself was in the lobby when Nathan came through the staff entrance. He was talking to one of the new security people and broke off when he saw Nathan, said something brief, and crossed the lobby. "Cole? Morning. How's the shoulder?" "It'll be fine." Nathan looked at the 2 new additions near the entrance. "Reinforcements?" 4 more. 2 inside, 2 external. Reeves's jaw was set with the particular tension of a professional who has had to add resources because a situation got away from him. "The presentation's at 10. Tighter protocol this morning. Full sweep, including all food and beverage staff. ID verification at every entry point." "Good. Yeah." A pause. "Park called me this morning, 6:30. Nathan looked at him. "They found something on Grayfield's phone," Reeves said. "Encrypted messages, but not encrypted well enough. There's a name. She wanted to let me know before it becomes public because it has implications for our security review." "She tell you the name?" "Harlan Voss." Nathan didn't react visibly. He turned the name over. It didn't mean anything to him directly, but the way Reeves said it suggested it should mean something to someone. "Who is he?" "Was," Reeves said. "Harlan Voss founded a company called Cortland Strategic Partners about 12 years ago. Infrastructure investment, primarily. Bridges, utilities, large-scale municipal contracts. He and Victoria Sterling were in competition for a government contract 4 years ago, a major one. Transit infrastructure in 3 states, multi-billion-dollar over a 10-year build-out." Nathan waited. "Cortland lost," Reeves said. Meridian got the contract. Voss contested the decision, claimed the bidding process was manipulated, filed suits. All of it got dismissed. The process was clean, or clean enough that nothing stuck. But Cortland had been building toward that contract for years. It was the centerpiece of their growth strategy. When they lost it, Reeves paused. The company didn't survive. Voss had overextended on the assumption they'd win. When they didn't, the financing collapsed. Cortland was liquidated 18 months later. And Voss? Went quiet, lost most of what he'd built. By all accounts, blamed Victoria Sterling personally, not just for winning the contract, but for what he called deliberate interference in the bid evaluation. He spent 2 years trying to prove it through legal channels and got nowhere. Reeves looked at the lobby floor briefly. Park thinks he spent the time after that building towards something else. Nathan thought about the sophistication of the entry method, the patience, the specific personal architecture of it. How certain is Park? He asked. Certain enough to have a warrant by 8 this morning. Reeves looked up. Voss has been in the city for 3 days. Checked into a hotel on the north side under a name that took them until 4 a.m. to untangle. A beat. He's in custody now. The information settled. Nathan thought about a man who'd spent years watching something he'd built collapse because he'd bet everything on a single outcome that didn't come through, and then spent more years converting that loss into something cold and operational and aimed. It was the kind of trajectory that was almost comprehensible, which made it worse, not better. Does Sterling know? Nathan asked. Park is briefing her at 8:30. Reeves paused. She asked if you'd be available to speak with Park again this morning, corroborate some of the timeline from yesterday. I'll be available. He went to work. Yend. The morning had its own rhythm. Nathan ran his first circuit of the building at 7, checked the fire door seal on the 4th floor. Properly addressed, as Clifford had promised, new gasket installed, solid contact around the full frame, and moved through the East Wing corridor checks with the mechanical attentiveness that 4 years had made second nature. The work was the same as it always was. The building didn't know what had happened in its ballroom yesterday. Its pipes and ducts and electrical runs and HVAC systems continued their indifferent functioning, requiring the same maintenance they always required, generating the same quiet, constant demands. He found the experience of that more grounding than he could easily explain. Park arrived at 8, came through the staff entrance this time, rather than the lobby, which told Nathan something about how she preferred to move. She found him in the 3rd-floor service corridor doing a door hardware check, and fell into step beside him without ceremony. Voss's people are talking, she said. Grayfield had 2 handlers, intermediaries between him and Voss, and when they found out Grayfield was in custody last night, they made the calculation that cooperation was more valuable than loyalty. She said it without satisfaction, just information delivered plainly. Voss's attorneys are already working damage control. He'll try to argue he never explicitly directed violence, that he hired consultants for, quote, security analysis of the event, and that anything Grayfield did was outside the scope of what he was told to do. That argument going to hold? Nathan asked. Not even a little. The messages are explicit enough. Park stopped walking when he stopped to check a door hinge. She watched him work with an expression of someone who had decided to stop being surprised by things. I need you to walk me through the timeline again. Specifically, the moment you first observed Grayfield and what you did immediately after. He walked her through it, all of it, in sequence, the same way he'd given the initial statement, precise about what he'd seen, precise about the basis for his conclusions, honest about the gaps. She asked good questions. She caught one small inconsistency in the timeline. He'd said he called hotel security after the second observation of the hand movement, but the call log showed it was after his conversation with Gerald, and he corrected it without defensiveness. She noted the correction without comment. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You called hotel security, she said. Then you called Gerald. Then you went back to observe. Then you positioned yourself before Reeves was even in the room. Yes. At what point did you decide that you were going to physically intervene if it came to that? He thought about it honestly. When I watched him put down the cloth. Up until then, I was trying to get someone else to handle it. But at that point, someone else wasn't going to be in position in time, so he said. So yes, that's a significant decision to make on your own assessment of a situation. It was, he said. I know that. Park looked at him. I'm not criticizing it. I'm building the legal record. The DA needs to understand that the intervention was a reasonable response to an imminent threat, not a preemptive action based on suspicion. She paused. The moment the blade appeared, your legal exposure becomes essentially zero. Everything before that is murkier. But how murky? Not very, given the outcome. But Voss's attorneys are going to look for any angle. You physically positioned yourself against a person before that person had done anything overtly threatening. That could be framed as provocation if they're creative about it. She said it matter-of-factly. They won't get far with it. Your verbal warning, Grayfield's aggressive response, Reeves as a witness, the picture is clear enough. I'm just telling you what's coming. I appreciate that. You'll need your own attorney present when Voss's people try to interview you, and they'll try. She held his gaze. Make sure it's someone good. He nodded. He knew a name or two from the other life. He didn't say that. Park put her notebook away. She had the look of someone shifting registers, moving from the professional to the personal, which she appeared to do reluctantly. I looked you up, she said. He kept his expression level. And I found a Nathan Cole who worked as a licensed executive protection specialist for a firm called Ardent Security Group for 6 years, ending about 4.5 years ago. The license lapsed. No current registration in any state. She paused. Ardent had a solid reputation, mid-level corporate and high net worth individual protection. Not glamorous, but serious work. He said nothing. I also found a Nathan Cole who left Ardent following an incident that was internally reviewed and cleared, she continued. The details of the review are private, but the clearance is on record. No disciplinary action, no liability findings. She paused again, longer this time. Whatever the incident was, it appears to be the reason the license lapsed. Nathan looked at the door hinge he'd been about to check. He looked at it for a moment, then finished checking it. Clean pivot, good tension, door seated properly in the frame. I'm not going to ask you about it, Park said. It's not relevant to this case, and it's not my business. She said it like she meant it, which he believed. I just wanted you to know that I know, because I think you've been carrying the assumption that nobody here knew who you were, and I wanted that off the table. He appreciated that more than the way she said it probably conveyed. Thank you, he said. The incident, she said, one more time, carefully. Whatever it was, it didn't follow you yesterday. What followed you yesterday was the training and the instinct and the decision to use them when it mattered. She held his gaze. I thought you should hear that too. She left. He stood in the third-floor service corridor for a moment with the door hinge and the quiet of a building going about its business and the particular weight of being known, suddenly and specifically, by someone he'd only met yesterday, in a way that he'd spent 4 years successfully avoiding. He went back to work. The Meridian Capital presentation went ahead at 10. Nathan wasn't in the ballroom. He had no reason to be, and no desire to be. He was on the second floor running a plumbing check on a guest bathroom that had reported low pressure when he heard, faintly through the building, the sound of applause. Muffled and distant, but unmistakable. The event had reached a moment worth applauding. He tightened a valve seat, and the pressure problem resolved itself. At 11:30, Clifford came to find him. He appeared in the corridor outside the second-floor utility closet with the expression of a man delivering a message he'd been asked to deliver carefully. Ms. Sterling would like to see you again, Clifford said, when you have a moment. Where? The same suite. Give me 10 minutes. He finished closing up the utility access, cleaned his hands, and went upstairs. The suite was quieter than yesterday. The support team had thinned out, most of them presumably managing the presentation's ongoing logistics on the ballroom floor. Reeves was at the door, nodded once when Nathan arrived, and opened it without comment. Victoria Sterling was sitting at the table this time, not standing at the window. There was coffee on the table, and she gestured to it when Nathan came in, a simple offer. He sat across from her and poured a cup. The presentation went well, she said. I heard the applause. She wrapped both hands around her own cup. She looked like someone who had slept less than she needed and had performed through it anyway, which was probably exactly true. Detective Park briefed me this morning. Harlan Voss. She said the name like it tasted of something. I knew it would be him. When Park described the profile, the patience, the infrastructure of it, I knew. That you suspected him before yesterday? Nathan asked. I'd received some communications over the past year, vague enough that my legal team said they didn't rise to the level of actionable threat. She paused. Harlan Voss lost something real when Cortland collapsed. I understand that. I understood it then, but the bid process was clean. We won on the merits. She said it without defensiveness, not trying to convince him, just stating what she believed to be true. He couldn't accept that. Some people need someone to blame so badly that they'll spend years building a case for it in their own heads until it becomes the only reality they can see. Nathan thought about that. He thought about the patience it required. Not admirable patience, nothing like that, but patience nonetheless, the slow, terrible accumulation of grievance into something operational. He's in custody, Nathan said. Yes. She looked down at her cup. Which means it's over, except for the legal process, which will take years and will be exhausting, and will keep this on my desk when I have other things that deserve to be on my desk. She said it plainly, without self-pity. Just the accounting of someone who understands that outcomes have costs, even when the outcome is the right one. You'll manage it, Nathan said. She looked up at him. You sound certain of that. You ran a presentation this morning 12 hours after someone tried to kill you, he said. I'm fairly certain you can manage a legal process. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. More like the expression of someone who has been handling things alone for a long time and has been surprised, briefly, by the specific quality of being seen accurately. I had someone pull your background this morning, she said. On my own initiative, before Park's briefing. I want to be transparent about that. I know, Nathan said. Park told me someone had. Victoria looked at him steadily. Ardent Security Group, 6 years. You were good at it, by every account I could find. The people you worked with spoke highly of you. A pause. The incident that ended it, I couldn't find details. My researcher couldn't either. That's intentional, Nathan said. I gathered that. She held his gaze. I'm not going to push you on it. I want you to know that whatever it was, it doesn't change how I'm sitting across from you right now. He looked at her. He thought about what to do with that, and then decided, for the first time in 4 years, to do something with it. There was a principal, he said. Corporate client. Significant threat profile. A business rival with resources and a personal grudge. Sound familiar? She didn't look away. Yes? We had an intelligence failure. I had information that should have elevated the threat level, and I weighed it wrong. Made a call I shouldn't have made, structurally. I told the team we were clear for a venue that we weren't clear for. He kept his voice even. He told this story to exactly one other person in 4 years, and that had been a therapist he'd seen for 3 months and then stopped seeing because talking about it wasn't changing anything about how it sat in his chest. Nothing happened to the principal, but one of my team took an injury that could have been much worse, would have been much worse if the attacker's weapon hadn't been less than he thought it was. He stopped. Victoria was quiet for a moment. And the internal review cleared you. The internal review determined the intelligence failure was systemic, and the call I made was within the reasonable range given what I had. He looked at the coffee cup. That didn't make it feel any different. So you left. I left. And came here. And came here? He looked up. The work is honest. The problems have solutions. Nobody gets hurt when I fix a drain. She held his gaze for a long time. He let her. Nathan, she said, and the use of his first name was deliberate, he could tell. A choice she'd made to signal something. What happened to your team member? Full recovery, he said. She's running her own firm now, actually. Does well. Something released in Victoria Sterling's posture. Subtle, but he'd spent 6 years reading bodies in rooms, and he caught it. I'm glad, she said simply. He drank the coffee. It was better than the basement break rooms, considerably better, which seemed appropriate. I want to offer you something again, she said. And I want to be clear that it's not about yesterday. Yesterday was something I'll carry for a long time, and I meant what I said. But this is separate. She paused, choosing the approach. I have a position opening in my company's security advisory function. It's not operational, no principles, no details. It's analytical, risk assessment, event security review, threat intelligence evaluation. It uses everything you know and none of the parts of the work that you walked away from. Nathan looked at her. You don't have to answer now, she said. I'm not trying to repay a debt with a job offer. This is a real position that I have a real need for. I'm offering it to you because you demonstrated yesterday exactly the kind of judgment it requires, and because, she paused, because I spent a long time this morning thinking about a man who saw something everyone else missed and then couldn't get anyone to listen. And I thought about how many places in my organization that dynamic might exist, and I'd like to have someone who understands that dynamic from the inside. He sat with it. He looked at the window, at the city going about its business outside, and he thought about the crawl space with the loose duct connection and the burned lamp on the 6th floor and the fire door seal that had sat in the work order queue for 2 weeks. I'll think about it, he said. It was more than he'd expected to say. She seemed to understand that and didn't push further. He stood and she stood, and they shook hands across the table, not the way she'd shaken hands in the ballroom yesterday, the practiced executive grip of someone working a room, but something more direct and less performed. Thank you for the coffee, he said. Thank you for yesterday, she said. He went back downstairs. The ballroom was audible as he passed the 2nd floor landing, still running, voices and presentation audio. The Meridian Capital event proceeding with whatever momentum the morning had built. He stood on the landing for a moment and listened to it, the muffled evidence of things continuing despite everything, and then he went to find Denny, who had left him 3 text messages since morning that he hadn't answered yet, and who deserved, at minimum, a straight answer to the question he'd asked the night before. He found Denny on the 4th floor running linen carts, moving at the particular pace of someone who's been at it for hours and is operating on momentum now rather than energy. Cole, Denny said, and stopped. I'm okay, Nathan said, answering the question before Denny could ask it again. Shoulders sore. Everything else is fine. Denny looked at him. 23 years old, still new enough to find things surprising. Are you going to tell me who you actually are? Nathan thought about what Park had said. He thought about what Victoria had said. He thought about the incident and the internal review and 4 years of deliberately being the man whose name nobody remembered. I'm the maintenance technician, he said. That's who I am. Denny opened his mouth. But I used to do something else, Nathan said, a long time ago. And yesterday it was useful. Denny stared at him. That's all I'm getting? That's all I've got. Denny seemed to consider this, running some internal calculation that ended with a slow nod. Okay, he said. Okay. He picked up the linen card again. There's a guest on 412 reporting a banging sound in the wall when they run the hot water. Probably the pipes expanding. Probably, Nathan said. I'll take a look. He took a look. It was the pipes expanding. He logged the work order closed and moved on. The pipes on the 4th floor banged every morning when the hot water came up. And every morning Nathan added a note to the work order log that the issue required a proper pipe hanger adjustment rather than the foam padding someone had installed years ago as a temporary fix that had since become permanent in the way that temporary fixes do when nobody with authority over the budget ever has to hear the noise personally. He noted it again on Wednesday morning and knew it would sit in the queue for another 2 weeks. Some things you couldn't fix in a day. Some things required a longer kind of patience. He'd been thinking about patience a lot since Tuesday. The Meridian Capital event was in its final day. The ballroom had been reconfigured overnight for a closing dinner, the round tables replaced with a long, formal arrangement, the presentation screens taken down, flowers brought in that cost more per arrangement than Nathan's car payment. He walked past it on his morning circuit and observed it through the propped service door the way he observed most things, without particular feeling about it, just taking in what was there. The event would end tonight. The security additions Reeves had brought in would pack up and leave. Victoria Sterling's team would check out, and the Windsor Regency would become again a hotel where wealthy people slept and ate and conducted business and occasionally noticed the maintenance staff just long enough to redirect them. The building would return to its normal rhythm, and Nathan would return to his, and Tuesday would become a story that people told in versions that drifted further from what actually happened with each retelling. That was fine. That was how things worked. What wasn't fine, what had been sitting in the back of his chest since Tuesday afternoon in a way he couldn't quite put down, was the job offer. He told Victoria Sterling he'd think about it, and he had been thinking about it, in the honest and somewhat uncomfortable way of a man who has spent 4 years very carefully, not wanting things, and has been unexpectedly presented with something he might want. He didn't want the work. That was still true. The operational life, the principal protection, the constant triangulation of threats and routes and communications and hierarchies, he'd made peace with leaving all of that more or less, and the incident with his team member had given him reasons that held up to examination. He wasn't running from it anymore. He'd simply moved away from it, the way you move away from a neighborhood that wasn't bad but wasn't right either. But the analytical work she'd described was different. Risk assessment, threat evaluation, the work of seeing, which was the part of the job he'd always been best at, and the part that required the least of what had cost him the most. He turned it over in his mind while he replaced a corroded bracket in the east stairwell, and while he ate lunch in the basement break room, and while he ran a filter check on the ground floor HVAC units in the afternoon. He turned it over without reaching a conclusion, which was itself unusual. He was generally good at conclusions. Reeves found him at 3 o'clock. Not the purposeful tracking of the previous days. This time Reeves was simply passing through the ground floor service corridor on his way somewhere else and stopped when he saw Nathan crouched over an HVAC access panel. "Last day," Reeves said. "I know." Reeves leaned against the wall. He had the slightly looser quality of someone whose operational posture was beginning to decompress. The job almost done. The principal safe. The logistics resolving. "Voss's attorneys tried to request a delay in arraignment this morning," he said. "Didn't get it. Park mentioned she'd push back on any delay." "She did." Reeves watched Nathan work for a moment. The two handlers who turned, they gave enough on the money trail to make Voss's distance argument completely untenable. The payments to Grayfield went through 2 shell accounts, but both trace back to a financial management company that Voss controls under a different name. He paused. "He's going to prison. The question is how long, and that's going to take a while to answer, but the direction is clear." "Good," Nathan said. "Sterling's legal team is also filing civil action. That's going to run parallel to the criminal case for years." Reeves seemed to be watching him for a reaction and not finding what he was looking for. "You're not curious about any of this, are you? You just want to know the threat is resolved." Nathan checked the filter and logged the reading. "The threat is resolved?" "Completely." "Then I know what I need to know." Reeves was quiet for a moment. "She told me she offered you a position." "She did." "You gonna take it?" Nathan closed the access panel. He sat back on his heels and looked at the panel for a moment. "I don't know yet." "What's the hang-up?" It was a direct question, and Reeves asked it the way direct people ask direct questions. Without aggression, without maneuvering, just a genuine desire to understand something. Nathan thought about giving him a deflecting answer, and then didn't. "The last time I was in that world, I made a call that put someone on my team in the hospital," he said. "The call was wrong. It was wrong because I was tired, not physically, a different kind of tired, the kind that makes you weigh things slightly off from true, and you don't know it's happening until afterward." He paused. "I came here to stop being that tired, and I'm not anymore, but I don't know if that changes anything about the call I made." Reeves absorbed that. He didn't offer reassurance, which Nathan appreciated. He just sat with it, the way someone sits with a thing they recognize. "The analytical work isn't operational," Reeves said finally. "I know." "Nobody goes to the hospital because a risk assessment was wrong." "No," Nathan said. "They go because the risk assessment was right and nobody listened." He looked at Reeves, which is a different problem, and one I have some experience with. Reeves looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite admiration, some third thing that lived between those two. "Yeah," he said. "You do." He pushed off the wall and continued down the corridor. Nathan stayed crouched by the HVAC unit for another moment, not working, just thinking. Then he stood up and went to find the next item on his list. What? The closing dinner started at 7. Nathan's shift ended at 5, but he'd picked up a facilities coverage slot that ran through 8 because 2 of the evening staff had called out sick, and Clifford had sent a building-wide ask. The overtime was straightforward, and the work was quiet, mostly responding to guest calls, small requests, the minor friction of a hotel running a large event. He changed a dead battery in a guest room remote control. He found a spare luggage rack for a couple on the 5th floor. He reset a tripped breaker in a storage room off the main kitchen that had taken out 2 outlets. Ordinary work. Necessary work. The kind of work that was always happening in the background of the events people paid attention to. At 7:40, one of Victoria Sterling's assistants appeared at the staff entrance and asked a passing housekeeper where Nathan Cole could be found. The housekeeper didn't know. The assistant asked at the desk. The desk called Clifford. Clifford called Nathan's radio. "Cole, someone from the Meridian team is looking for you." He was on the 3rd floor checking a reported drip from a bathroom fixture. "Tell them I'll be down in 10 minutes. The drip was a loose supply line connection, a 2-minute fix with the right wrench. He was downstairs in 7. The assistant, a young woman named Elena, who had the compressed efficiency of someone managing 6 things simultaneously and doing it well, met him near the lobby and walked with him toward the ballroom entrance, speaking at a pace calibrated to cover information before they arrived. "Miss Sterling would like you to join her for a few minutes during the dinner," Elena said. "Not a formal thing. She's not going to make an announcement or put you on the spot. She just wants you present, with a seat at the table." Nathan looked at his coveralls, at the name patch, at his hands, clean but permanently carrying the faint evidence of the work they did, the particular weathering of someone who worked with tools. "I'm not dressed for a closing dinner," he said. "Miss Sterling anticipated that," Elena said, and produced, with the specificity of someone who has been briefed carefully, a dry cleaning bag that she'd apparently been carrying over one arm. "She asked your size from the hotel HR records this morning. She said to tell you that you're not obligated, and that if you'd rather not, that's completely understood and carries no weight either way." Nathan took the bag. He looked at it. He thought about the distance between this moment and the one in the ballroom 2 days ago, when Victoria Sterling had looked through him like a window. 5 minutes, Elena said. To change. The suit was a good one. He didn't know the brand and didn't care about the brand, but it fit well, which told him someone had taken the trouble to think about it rather than just guessing. He stood in the staff restroom and looked at himself in the mirror and noted, with some detachment, that he looked like a different version of himself. Or more accurately, like a version he'd been before. The version that existed in conference rooms, and advanced security work, and the particular invisible infrastructure of people who keep other people safe. He didn't know how he felt about that. He gave himself the 30 seconds it would take to feel something about it, and then let it go and went back out. The Windsor Regency Grand Ballroom and dinner configuration was a different place than it had been 2 days ago. The long formal table, candlelight, the room reduced to something more human in scale than the event setup had been. 40 people, maybe. Senior Meridian executives, some clients, a few external partners. Conversation and the sounds of a meal in progress. The room doing what it was designed to do and doing it well. Victoria Sterling saw him come in. She was at the center of the table, as befitted the principal, and she was in the middle of saying something to the person on her left. But she caught Nathan's entrance and gave a small, direct nod, not drawing attention, not performing gratitude for the room, just acknowledging that he was there. Elena placed him at a seat near the end of the table, next to a Meridian executive named Patterson, who turned out to have opinions about urban infrastructure that were specific and well-informed, and who didn't ask Nathan anything about himself for the first 20 minutes, which was ideal. They talked about drainage systems and load-bearing specifications, and the particular challenges of retrofitting older buildings to current standards. And Nathan found, to his mild surprise, that he had more to say about all of it than he would have expected 4 years ago. Reeves was stationed near the ballroom entrance. He caught Nathan's eye once across the room and gave him a look that was entirely neutral, but somehow communicated amusement, which Nathan appreciated. During a lull between courses, Victoria excused herself from her end of the table and moved down to where Nathan was sitting. She sat in the empty chair across from him. The place had been left open, he realized, which told him Elena had planned this, and set her wine glass down. "You look uncomfortable," she said. "A little," he said. "I've been in these rooms before. I was usually standing near the wall." "Do you want to be standing near the wall now?" He thought about it. "No," he said. "I'm all right." She looked at him with that quality of assessment she had, the one that didn't feel invasive because it was honest rather than strategic. "Have you thought more about the position?" "I have." "And?" He looked at the table, the good linen, the candlelight, 40 people who had come close to experiencing something terrible and were instead sitting at a dinner that was proceeding exactly as planned. The room was full of a kind of ordinary richness that felt, tonight, less than ordinary. It felt like something that had been protected, something that existed because 2 days ago someone had been paying attention. "I'll take it on a trial basis," he said. 3 months. I want to see if the work is what you described and if my judgment is useful in that context. If it is, we can discuss something more formal." Victoria Sterling looked at him. 3 months, she said. "I'm not going to give up the apartment," he said, "and I'd like to keep some relationship with the kind of work I've been doing. Not here, necessarily, but something that keeps my hands involved in something concrete." She seemed to find that more understandable than he'd expected. That's not an unreasonable set of conditions. "I also wanted in writing that if I produce an assessment and it's overridden without substantive reason, I can document my disagreement formally. I'm not interested in being a name on a report that nobody reads." She held his gaze. "I'll have legal draft it that way." "Then we have an agreement," he said. She extended her hand across the table and he shook it, the same way they'd shaken hands in the suite upstairs. Direct, no performance in it. A thing agreed to between two people who had looked at each other clearly enough to decide it was worth trying. "Nathan," she said, not releasing the handshake immediately. "What you told me yesterday, about the incident, about why you left." She paused. "I want you to know that I built Meridian by making calls that didn't always land right. Some of them cost people something. Not physically, but cost them." She looked at the table briefly. "I've spent a lot of years being very certain about my own judgment, and 2 days ago I was completely, specifically wrong about a person standing 5 feet away from me." She looked back up. "I'm not telling you that to equate our situations. I'm telling you because I think you've been harder on yourself about your call than you'd be on anyone else who made the same call with the same information." He looked at her. "You don't have to agree with me," she said. "I don't entirely disagree with you," he said, which was as far as he was able to go honestly, and she seemed to understand that. She went back to her end of the table. Nathan ate the rest of his dinner and talked more with Patterson about municipal infrastructure and said almost nothing about himself, which was comfortable and felt right. The dinner ended at 10. The room cleared gradually. The particular slow dispersal of a closing event, people reluctant to end something that had been, against all Tuesday's odds, a success. Nathan changed back into his work clothes in the staff restroom. The suit he left hanging in the garment bag with a note asking Elena to return it, and did a final walk-through of the building as the last of the evening's coverage. The ballroom was being broken down by the overnight cleaning crew. He stood at the service door and watched them work for a moment. Efficient, focused, moving through the room with the same kind of invisible professionalism that he understood from the inside. They had a system. The system worked. Nobody would think about them in the morning. He went through the east wing, the stairwells, the service corridors, everything in order. The fire door on the 4th floor seated solid in its frame, the HVAC systems running clean, the building doing what buildings do, which is the same thing they do every day regardless of what happened inside them, standing up, holding their weight, providing the structure within which the human drama of any given Tuesday plays out and resolves and becomes history. He found Reeves near the main entrance, the last of the security team waiting for a car. The new additions had gone hours ago. It was just Reeves and one other, a woman named Torres who'd been part of the original detail and who Nathan had seen but never spoken to. "Good dinner?" Reeves asked. "Good enough," Nathan said. "You eat?" "Event staff fed us in the corridor." He said it without complaint. That was just how it worked. Nathan knew that. She told me, Reeves said, about the 3 months, the trial arrangement. She told you quickly. She tells me things I need to know. Reeves paused. I want to be clear that I don't have a problem with it. In case you were wondering. I wasn't, Nathan said. But I appreciate it. Reeves nodded. He looked at the lobby, the late-night quiet of it, the marble and the chandelier doing their thing for an empty room. You know what I kept thinking about today, he said, while I was running the final sweep. Nathan waited. You tried to tell 4 different people, Reeves said. Gerald, hotel security, me. He paused. And when none of it worked, you didn't leave. You didn't decide it wasn't your problem. He looked at Nathan. Most people leave. Most people make the report and figure they've done their part, and whatever happens next isn't on them. He shook his head slightly. You stayed in that room. Nathan thought about that. He thought about why he'd stayed. The honest reason, not the version that sounded considered and principled. He'd stayed because he was certain, and because the thing he was certain about mattered, and because the specific failure mode of walking away from a certainty, because nobody would confirm it was a failure mode, he knew too well and would not repeat. I was also the only one who knew what I was looking at, he said. That's not virtue. That's just position. Maybe, Reeves said, but position and choice are different things. The car arrived. Reeves and Torres picked up their bags. Reeves stopped at the door. Monday, he said. Nathan had been told he'd start the analytical role on a Monday 3 weeks out, a transition period to allow the HR and legal work to be completed. Don't wear the coveralls. I'll think about it, Nathan said. Reeves almost smiled. Then he was out the door and the lobby was quiet. Nathan stood in it for a moment. The chandelier that cost a fortune to assemble threw its light across the marble in the same pattern it threw every night, indifferent to the week that had happened beneath it. The front desk was running on overnight skeleton staff. The building breathed its slow mechanical breath through its ducts and pipes, and the bones of its structure. He thought about a thing that had occurred to him in the crawl space 2 days ago, when he was fixing the loose duct connection and listening to the muffled sounds of the Meridian Capital event resuming on the floor above. He'd thought about how most of what kept the world running was invisible, not dramatic, not acknowledged. The pipes that carried the water, the seals that kept the heat in, the person watching a room that everyone else had decided was safe. The whole architecture of ordinary maintenance that meant when you walked into a building, the lights came on and the floors held and nothing fell on you. People noticed buildings when they failed. They didn't notice them when they worked. He'd made peace with being part of that, the unnoticed working part. He'd chosen it deliberately, and he'd found a genuine rightness in it, not as consolation for something lost, but as something with its own value, honest and unglamorous and real. What Tuesday had done, what he was still working out how to carry, was make visible, briefly and against his preference, the fact that the invisible part of him and the invisible part of his work were not the same kind of invisible. The building's pipes didn't have a history. They didn't carry anything except what they were built to carry. Nathan Cole carried something else, something he'd accumulated over years of a different kind of work, and Tuesday had demonstrated that it didn't disappear just because he'd stopped using it. You couldn't leave behind what you actually knew. You could choose what you did with it. That was the distinction he'd been missing for 4 years, and it had taken a man in a borrowed catering uniform and a concealed blade to make it clear. He wasn't the maintenance technician who used to be something else. He was a person who had done serious work at serious cost to himself, and had then done different serious work and had now decided, on a trial basis and with specific conditions in writing, to do something in between. The categories didn't resolve into something clean. They weren't supposed to. Clean categories were for people who hadn't actually lived inside the complications. He locked the service entrance behind him and walked to his car. The city was doing what it did at 10:30 on a Wednesday. Still moving, always moving, the particular restless energy of a place that doesn't fully sleep. He drove home with the windows down and thought about the pipes on the 4th floor that needed proper hangers instead of foam padding, and made a mental note to escalate the work order one more time before Monday, because whoever took over his building circuit should have an accurate picture of what was actually needed. It was, he thought, the least he could do. Not heroism, not legacy. Not the clean resolution of a story where everything meant something and the lessons announced themselves. Just a man who noticed things, doing the next right thing, which was sometimes stopping an assassination and sometimes filing a work order about banging pipes, and which required, in both cases, exactly the same quality of attention. He parked in his usual spot and walked up to his apartment and made coffee he didn't need at this hour because he wanted it, and sat at the table by the window and looked at the city until the coffee was gone. The shoulder still ached. It would for another few days. That was fine. He'd had worse, and he'd gotten through worse. And tomorrow morning the building would need the same things it always needed, and he would go and provide them, and none of it would be noticed, and all of it would matter. That had always been enough. It still was.